remember a couple of weeks ago, that idiot Donald Trump joined Lee Greenwood to announce his own U.S. Bible that also has a U.S. Constitution in it. And oh, Lord, these crazy white conservative evangelicals, Trump MAGA-loving people just lost their mind. Didn't sit quite well with a North Carolina pastor, Lauren Livingston of Central Church in Charlotte. Is going viral after he issued a scathing rebuke. Did not mention Trump by name, but and his supporters, but we damn sure knew who he was talking about.
People that don't read and pray will get politics mixed up with church. They start mixing and meshing together. That's why some of you bring politics into the church. You think that politics is spiritual stuff. Politics is of this world. You think it's your duty to be political about this, that, and the other. No, your duty is to serve the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, body, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Don't be talking to me about my spiritual responsibility to vote. I don't have a spiritual responsibility to vote. I have a civic privilege. Don't be telling me that voting is spiritual. See, that's what happens when you don't read and pray. When you don't read and pray, you say, wow, there's a Bible out now that includes the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Isn't that wonderful? No. No, it's disgusting. It's blasphemous. It's a ploy. Are you kidding me? Some of you are so encouraged by that. Let me tell you something. The gospel is not an American gospel. It is the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. But Pastor, I bought the Bible. Really? You're telling me that you're encouraged because someone took a government U.S. Constitution, a document that says we are of the people, by the people, and for the people, the people, the people, the people. And you have put it right beside the Word of God, which is eternal, unchanging, which says of Him, by Him, through Him, to Him, from Him are all things. And you're going to put those together and be happy about it? God forbid. Now, you can get mad if you want to, but I'm going to tell you something. If you glory in that kind of thing, you don't have a prayer life. If you glory in that kind of mess, political mess, you do not know what the Word of God says. I'm going to rear back and tell you something. This is not my home. This world is not my home. I've been sent out just like the 70 were sent out. You've been put here and sent out just like the 70 were sent out. We've been put here as strangers and pilgrims, and we are passing through. I am just walking through. I'm just renting an apartment for a little while in this strange and foreign land. No, sir. My real citizenship is in heaven, from which we look for the Lord Jesus Christ, who's going to change our vile body, that it may be made like unto His glorious body.
As I said, he did not name any one by name, but he laid it out there, Robert.
He did indeed, and I think it's an important position to lay out for the religious community because we've had a lot of push in the last 40 years or so since we had kind of emerging of the conservative movement at the Republican Party during the Reagan administration. If you remember Jerry Falwell, Pat Buchanan, the Christian Coalition, the Moral Majority, etc. You know, the Sunday morning programming that many of us grew up with, we understood that they began to merge and become one political group, one political force. But that group has long ago frayed and moved asunder. And this conceptualization that we are going to continue to conflate Christianity with conservatism in this country is anachronistic at best. The same person who just put out the Lee Greenwood Bible that will remain unnamed is also may or may not be on trial for paying off a porn star currently. So when we start conflating our political beliefs with our religious beliefs, eventually, as the pastor says, you have to confront the fact that you are taking divine documents and entangling them with the machinations of man. And as long as you do that, you're not being true to either side of that discussion and either side of your belief system. And we have to begin moving those. We either need to move those things apart or hold the political parties and our political dynamics into the standard laid out there. If you're going to talk about being a Christian party or a party that believes in the Bible, well, you have to let those immigrants in because that's what it says in the book. You're going to have to feed those homeless people and clothe those homeless people. You have to provide housing for the people who don't have access to such. The reason that there's a separation between church and state in America is just to avoid those sorts of dynamics that exist and then the conflicts that exist when you start saying that one particular religion is the one that is granted favor by our political process because the only thing that comes out of that is death and warfare. So I want more pastors to take this position. I want more people in the community to take this position and understand that you're not doing a service either to your congregation or to the God that you report to believe in once you start conflating that with your Christian beliefs.
Rebecca, these folks ain't godly. These folks are not godly. They do not vote upon their Christian principles at all. They are religious frauds.
I mean, maybe they're godly with the God that they believe in, but it's not the God I believe in. I mean, I believe in Black Jesus.
No,
but
they ain't godly. No, they ain't godly. They ain't godly. Nope.
I mean,
no, they're not godly.
I mean, these are the same people who turn their backs on immigrants and turn their backs on people of color. And Jesus was not blonde hair and blue eyed. So, I mean, clearly, I don't think that my religious beliefs are these people's religious beliefs that are who are part of the cult of white nationalism. And right now, their God appears to be Trump. But that said, and on a serious note, good for him. Especially hearing this coming out of North Carolina. I was actually trying to look up and figure out what denomination that Pastor Livingston is affiliated with, because I was trying to figure out if he was part of the Southern Baptist Convention, but I couldn't find that information on him. But, at some point, there has to be daylight with those who are saying that they believe in a merciful God. There has to be some type of daylight between what these people are pushing out to their congregation and what they're hearing from Trump. Because at the end of the day, I don't know how you stand with someone who has 91 indictments pending, who says all the crazy stuff that he's saying, and then say that you're a follower of Christ. And it's not even and my issue with this on faith isn't even because Trump it has these indictments, but from the actions and things that Trump actually says. I don't understand how that's consistent with a gospel of peace. So, good for him. I don't know anything else about him. Maybe people would dig. Hopefully there isn't crazy stuff about that particular pastor. But at least on this thing, I think he's right.
Tyler?
I would agree. I think Trump has shown himself to play in folks' faces, and yet here he is, playing in the faces of folks in religion. And we saw that when he walked out in the middle of the protest and cleared out the way and put his Bible up in front of during the George Floyd, protest eruption. And so I think And as much as they talk about religion, as mentioned before by my fellow panelists, it has to coincide with that belief. You know, the Bible talks about in Matthew, and as much as you have done unto me, you have done unto others. So as much as you have kept food off the table of others, you have kept the food off the table of him. And as much as, you have kept the people from being able to access housing and folks be able to access, things for their health, you have done it unto him. And so that has to coincide with one another. And I think clearly here, they're serving, I don't know who they're serving, but as mentioned before, they ain't serving the God that I pray to every night. But they're playing games with the wrong one.
Well, but that's exactly who they are. And again, we see how fraudulent they are in their decisions. I'm looking for this tweet from the always pretty ignorant Franklin Graham, the son of Billy Graham. I take no direction. I would never follow Billy Graham anywhere. I wouldn't follow him around a grocery store with the crap that he says, because all he does is carry the water of Donald Trump. And, the excuses that they make for this thug are always quite interesting, Robert, because that's what they do. In fact, look at this. And this is the same fool who had the audacity to question the faith of President Barack Obama. Well, I mean, he's a Christian if he says he's a Christian, yet he will defend Trump at any point. So check this out. Look at this tweet right here. This is this fool here. Pray for former President Donald Trump. His enemies want to do everything they can to destroy him, to put him in jail, or to drag out this trial to prevent him from campaigning. I'm not telling you to vote for him. I'm asking you to pray for him. And nowhere in there that you see Franklin Graham say, hold the thug accountable if he did the things he's accused of. That's what you got going on here. He is a flat out fraud himself. And that's why I'm sick and tired of these mainstream networks continuing to put Franklin Graham on the air to speak for Christians. He ain't even a pastor, Robert.
Yeah,
And in fact, I'll go ahead and say this, Robert. I go ahead and say this here. The only reason he took over his daddy's ministry is because of his genitalia. The reality is the real preacher in the family, the real preacher is his sister. She can out-preach this fool any day. And it's only because she's a woman that she was not put in charge of the family ministry. She's much smarter and a better preacher than this idiot Franklin Graham.
Wasn't there like a picture a few years ago of Franklin Graham with like a drunk woman with like his belt undone and all kinds of other things? Look,
no. That's that other son of a preacher man, which is the Aretha Franklin song. That was Jerry Falwell Jr. He screwed up. So remember, his wife was allegedly having an affair with the pool boy, so that boy, he was so messed up, they kicked his ass out of Liberty University.
Look, bro, the point that I'm making is this is the reason we have a crisis of faith in this country. You have an entire generation, 2 generations, 3 generations at this point in time that have rejected the church and the church's teaching primarily because of the hypocrisy of the people leading the church. Because the church is no longer what it was when many of us were growing up, this moral paradigm of the community where you could trust in the word of the pastor, where you could trust that the money you were donating was going to the community and to its causes, where you could trust that what you were being fed on Sunday was true fruit for your soul that could sustain you throughout the week. Because these churches become theatrical performances in large part, because they've become sold out to politics, because they've been sold out to corporations, where they will come in on Sunday and be selling you Coca-Cola and cell phones and everything else right there in the sanctuary of the church. Many people have left religion altogether and just have moved towards spirituality. And when you see these churches co-signing a Bible that has been molested and adulterated to put American documents in it, as if when they were writing it in Arimathea 2,000 years ago, they were considering what George Washington and Thomas Jefferson wanted to have in it. This is why you're having the people going to church falling and the religion dying around itself, because we've allowed so many hypocrites and so many blasphemers to take over leadership roles and to take over the church. We need to understand that the true word, you don't have to go to anyone for interpretation. It's written right down there for you. You can go peel back the onion all the way back to the original verses and learn for yourself. And we're seeing more and more people deciding, I don't need some man in a robe and a choir and everyone else to tell me what the book says. I can just read it for myself and live my life to those dictates.
Well, look, we have preachers and leaders, but this fool is a fraudulent Christian as ever we can think about it. And as I was sitting here, Rebecca, I'm petty. Petty. I ain't got no problem saying I'm petty. And let me show my pettiness when it comes to this fake Christian, so-called God-fearing fool. He really is a demon. He really is a disciple of the devil. That's Donald Trump. This right here explains all you need to know.
I'm wondering what one or two of your most favored Bible verses are, and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it, because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal, so I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that you like?
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible... The whole Bible is an incredible... I joke very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special.
I'm wondering what one or two of your most favored Bible verses...
You know, Roland, my daddy used to pastor, and at one point had 4 sets of answers.
Wait. Hold up. I got to run that back.
I'm wondering what one or two of your most favored Bible verses are, and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it, because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal, so I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that you like?
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. It's just an incredible... The whole Bible is an incredible... I joke very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special.
I'm wondering what one or two of your most favored Bible verses are, and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it.
Rebecca, go ahead.
So at one point, I had 4 sets of aunts and uncles who were pastoring Kojic churches. So definitely grew up in church. And I think I might have been a teenager, and my dad was asking me my favorite scripture. And you know what I told him? I said, my favorite passage is when Jesus showed up to the temple and whooped those people's behinds. I said, that's my inspiration of Jesus. I said, the meek and mild stuff, y'all can keep it. But
what happened? Well,
here, that's my favorite. But here's the bottom line. The Bible also says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, i.e. pay your taxes. If some of these churches had to pay taxes, I don't think some of these churches would exist anymore. And what's unfortunate is that we're seeing with the rise of white nationalism in this country, it has happened because of the Christian right, which really isn't using the Bible, but is pushing the spirituality of whiteness and the superiority of whiteness.
Where the Spirit of the Lord, 2 Corinthians.
I got more petty. I just got to be petty. Here we go.
But 2 Corinthians, right? 2 Corinthians 3:17. That's the whole ballgame. Where the Spirit of the Lord, right? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And here there is Liberty College, but Liberty University, but it is so true. But 2 Corinthians, right? 2 Corinthians 3:17, that's the whole ball game.
Them fools at Liberty actually clap for that.
And that's the funny part, that they actually clap for it, and they're continuing to stroke his ego on something that he has no idea about. Yet he has a Bible out, but what the greatest commandment in that Bible says, "Go ye therefore and teach all nations," but yet he can't even say his favorite Bible verse. And so I think, he's just literally playing in our faces and playing in the faces of religion. And it's hilarious. It's sometimes it's hilarious to laugh at and look at, but it's sad at the same time that people are actually believing and following this man who has absolutely no idea. He probably doesn't know where his left arm is from his right.
Too good. That's the whole ball game. All right.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
We truly do have, frankly, a corrupt Supreme Court. Today, oral arguments were heard regarding Trump's claim of complete immunity. And I swear, the questions from these conservative judges, Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, even Justice John Roberts, you're shaking your head going, are y'all serious? Are you literally serious? This idiot Clarence Thomas came out of the gate. First of all, why is he even hearing the case, considering he's married to somebody who's an insurrectionist? Y'all, Lord have mercy. Okay, all right. Check this out, okay? We're going to first play you a soundbite. This is Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, one of the sane folks.
That's more worried about. You seem to be worried about the president being chilled. I think that we would have a really significant opposite problem if the president wasn't chilled. If someone with those kinds of powers, the most powerful person in the world, with the greatest amount of authority, could go into office knowing that there would be no potential penalty for committing crimes. I'm trying to understand what the disincentive is from turning the Oval Office into, the seat of criminal activity in this country.
I don't think there's any allegation of that in this case. And what George Washington said is, what Benjamin Franklin said is, we view the prosecution of a chief executive as something that everybody cried out against as unconstitutional. And what George Washington said is, we're worried about factional strife, which will.
No, I'm also, let me put this worry on the table. If the potential for criminal liability is taken off the table, wouldn't there be a significant risk that future presidents would be emboldened to commit crimes with abandon while they're in office? It's right now the fact that we're having this debate because OLC has said that presidents might be prosecuted. Presidents from the beginning of time have understood that that's a possibility. That might be what has kept this office from turning into the kind of crime center that I'm envisioning. But once we say no criminal liability, Mr. President, you can do whatever you want, I'm worried that we would have a worse problem than the problem of the president feeling constrained to follow the law while he's in office.
I respectfully disagree with that because the regime you've described is the regime we've operated under for 234 years. There has.
All right, folks, here is Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Malum in se is a concept long viewed as appropriate in law, that there's some things that are so fundamentally evil that they have to be protected against. Now, I think, and your answer below, I'm going to give you a chance to say if you stay by it, If the president decides that his rival is a corrupt person and he orders the military or orders someone to assassinate him, is that within his official acts that for which he can get immunity?
It would depend on the hypothetical, but we can see that could well be an official act.
It could, and why? Because he's doing it for personal reasons. He's not doing it like President Obama is alleged to have done it, to protect the country from a terrorist. He's doing it for personal gain. And isn't that the nature of the allegations here? That he's not doing these acts in furtherance of an official responsibility. He's doing it for personal gain.
I agree with that characterization of the indictment, and that confirms immunity, because the characterization is that there's a series of official acts that were done for an unlawful.
No, because immunity says even if you did it for personal gain, we won't hold you responsible. How could that be?
Now you go from that brilliance to this, let's just say crap, from Justice Sam Alito.
I'm sure you would agree with me that a stable democratic society requires that a candidate who loses an election, even a close one, even a hotly contested one, leave office peacefully if that candidate is the incumbent.
Of course.
All right. Now, if an incumbent who loses a very close, hotly contested election knows that a real possibility after leaving office is not that the president is going to be able to go off into a peaceful retirement, but that the president may be criminally prosecuted by a bitter political opponent, will that not lead us into a cycle that destabilizes the functioning of our country as a democracy? And we can look around the world and find countries where we have seen this process, where the loser gets thrown in jail.
So I think it's exactly the opposite, Justice Alito. There are lawful mechanisms to contest the results in an election. And outside the record, but I think of public knowledge, petitioner and his allies filed dozens of electoral challenges, and my understanding is lost all but one that was not outcome determinative in any respect. There were judges that said in order to sustain substantial claims of fraud that would overturn an election result that's certified by a state, you need evidence, you need proof. And none of those things were manifested. So there is an appropriate way to challenge things through the courts with evidence. If you lose, you accept the results. That has been the nation's experience. I think the court is well familiar with that.
Mr. Sauer and others have identified events in the past, conduct that might have been charged as a federal crime, and you say, well, no, that's not really true. This is page 42 of your brief. So what about President Franklin D. Roosevelt's decision to intern Japanese Americans during World War II? Couldn't that have been charged under 18 U.S.C. 241, conspiracy against civil rights?
Today, yes, given this court's decision in Trump versus United States, in which Trump versus Hawaii, where the court said Korematsu is overruled. I mean, President Roosevelt made that decision with the advice of his Attorney General. That's a layer of safeguard.
Is that really true? I thought Attorney General Biddle thought that there was really no threat of sabotage, as did J. Edgar Hoover.
So I think that there is a lot of historical controversy, but it underscores that occurred during wartime. It implicates potential commander-in-chief concerns about the exigencies of national defense that might provide an as-applied Article 2 challenge at the time. I'm not suggesting today, but the idea that a decision that was made and ultimately endorsed by this court, perhaps wrongly, in the Korematsu case, would support criminal prosecution under 241, which requires under United States versus Lanier that the right have been made specific so that there is notice to the president. I don't think that would have been satisfied.
All right.
Lauren, is it me or the conservative justices nuts?
Yeah, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, what we're listening to is an argument about whether or not Donald Trump can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, to whomever he wants, right? That's what Sam Alito wants to check for everybody. Whether or not Donald Trump can just do anything, anytime, anyplace, whether it's assassinate other people, whether it's, you know, call for an attack on the U.S. Capitol, whatever. We just want to know that. I mean, that is the backdrop of what we're talking about. A U.S. president that incited an attack on the United States Capitol. It's incited an attack on the legislative branch to block the certification of his opponent who beat him by 8 million votes. And these guys are up here talking about this like it's past assault. That's the line that they've moved us to, that this is normal conversation. And Sam Alito is an absolute trip. But, you know, it's all for Donald Trump. It's all for the tiki god of Donald Trump. It's all to please Donald Trump. And it's the audience of one theory once again. Sam Alito wants to make sure, and Clarence Thomas wants to make sure, that Donald Trump can hear what they're saying and make sure that everybody knows in Trump world and MAGA world that we're standing up for Trump. So this is going to be an interesting decision, because I actually think they may go in Trump's favor.
I mean, you're sitting here and you're listening to a Trump lawyer, Nola, say, yeah, you know, hey, he can actually have Navy SEAL Team 6 kill a political rival.
Right.
Sure. Not a problem.
Right.
I mean, this is insane. This is crazy.
Right. Right. Right.
You saying so much, I can't. Did you say my name? Okay. Anyhow.
Nola?
Yes, you did.
Yeah,
you know what? This is for many years, I TA'd and co-taught law policy, a law and policy class at USC, as we're talking about young folks. And one of the things that students will constantly say over and over, how can any fair adjudication ever happen when the starting point is, oh, this is a liberal judge, and oh, this is a conservative judge? So the starting point, let's start there with the problem of, you can talk about this in terms of being a constitutionalist or a traditionalist, but at the end of the day, you're going to find something that fits your ideology that already exists. And there are particular judges on the Supreme Court that were handpicked by Donald Trump just for this reason. And it was not kept a secret. It was in plain view, in plain sight. Trying to pregame it for a situation just like this. So the conversation, while it is around this particular situation, is a lot larger than this. We need to completely rethink our Supreme Court system. It should not be along the lines of political ideology. I think that is a mistake. It is a mistake, and it will continue to drag us down into the same voids, the same black holes that we are in right now. Because basically, it's a situation of who can craft the best argument that fits an ideology, and that is not okay. And I'm not saying that I tend to have more empathy and sympathy for the liberal judges, because I feel like they have to do a lot of, acrobatics to speak in a way that makes sense versus the ideology. But if we need, talk about correcting the entire system, it needs to happen on both sides. The way that our system currently exists, it is not working and it is not helpful. Now, in terms of where they will land with this, they're going to kick it back to the lower courts, because they understand, beyond Donald Trump, even though I believe if he gets in, you're going to have to drag him out by his toes in that hairpiece that was flying around in the wind today, because he's not going to come out. And the next person who gets in that will be a Democrat, then that same standard has to apply. And that will be the only thing that will keep them from going full Trump. And, I think that they will kick it back down to the lower court. But this is a huge problem in our country that needs to be fixed.
Greg, these justices, they literally, this is how deranged MAGA is. They want to allow this man to do whatever he wants, when he wants, and this is all a move to further delay the trial. It's sickening, but it is who they are. And the fact that Clarence Thomas is actually allowed to sit on the bench knowing exactly what his wife was involved in, I keep telling people, you can sit here and talk about, I'm not going to vote. Let me be very clear to all of y'all people who are thinking that right now. Clarence Thomas is 75. Sam Alito is 74. If Donald Trump is elected in November, those two are going to immediately retire so Donald Trump can replace them on the bench. And Sonia Sotomayor is 69. He may actually, again, if he wins, he may actually replace 3. That means he would have picked 6 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices. But folks go ahead and decide they want to sit their ass at home. Greg, go ahead.
That's right, Roland. And that's what this is about. I agree with you, Prof. I agree with you, Nola. They're going to try to kick this back down, more than likely. And that will leave it in the hands of Judge Chuckton to try to parse when a public act or private act might fall outside the scope of presidential immunity. And you're absolutely right, Roland. This is really what this is about. This is about getting their master, as you said, their tiki god, Lauren, past November. This is what this is about. And so, John Henry Clark used to say in some stories, there are no good guys. So when you bring up the specter of Korematsu, it's a tragic moment in U.S. history. When you say something like Clarence Thomas, who was a complete embarrassment to the bench, to his race, and to basically to anything associated with any common human decency. Clarence Thomas brought up the Bay of Pigs today and said there were no prosecutions after the Bay of Pigs. And the lawyer had to remind him, well, there's a doctrine called a public authority defense. So when you see a president who acts in a way that you might not agree with, he's protected from prosecution for overseas acts. And that was kind of like in the same vein, a similar vein as you heard the reply to the Korematsu case. But as a black person, I can sympathize with the idea of illegal actions or immoral actions. And you heard Sonia Sotomayor refer to a Latin phrase, malum esse. Malum in se in the law means it is evil in itself. It's a moral wrong, regardless of whether it's illegal or not, or whether it's legal by a legal standard. It is wrong in itself. Well, that's what we're facing here. If we get to that issue, but I agree, we're not going to get to that issue because their number one goal, the Christian soldier, Sam Alito, who is a hard right-wing ideologue, but also a political animal, Clarence Thomas, who is a black man, who knows how much time he's got. His hair turns snow white. We know that diabetes and heart disease is real in black communities. And with the stress he's under as a whole manservant of white supremacy for decades, God only knows how much time any of us have on the earth. But I wouldn't bet against Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito, as you say, tendering their resignations at some point under a Trump presidency. And finally, I'll end with this. If they can get him past the election, then we all know what happens to this case. He will direct the Department of Justice to dismiss it. But that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to string this clock out.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
It really gets on my nerves when I see conservatives, especially white conservatives, say some of the most outlandish things when it comes to comparing the plight of thug-in-chief Donald Trump to the revered veterans of the Black Freedom Movement, also known as the Civil Rights Movement. Newt Gingrich, the disgraced former Speaker of the House, who should not give anybody any marital advice whatsoever, was on Fox News, and this idiot actually said this.
I think in terms of the court, something that Speaker Mike Johnson said really struck home with me when he said about the decision on whether or not to help Israel and Ukraine, that this is not a game. Let me tell you, I am deeply worried that tomorrow a totally corrupt judge and a totally corrupt district attorney are going to try to put a former president of the United States, candidate of his party, and front runner in the polls in jail. Now, I think this is so horrendous that there has to be some way to reach out to the Supreme Court. I mean, this is literally like some of the civil rights workers in Mississippi in the 1960s. The New York system is now so deeply corrupted, and it is so bitterly, deeply anti-Trump. The absurdity of the judge's daughter, who made millions and millions of dollars doing anti-Trump politics, and the judge would like us to believe, much like Joe Biden, he had no idea what his children were doing. I mean, the whole thing, frankly, resembles On the Waterfront, Stanley Kubrick's brilliant film. This is about corruption. It has nothing to do with honesty. And what worries me is it's a genuine threat to Donald Trump. I mean, I think any step that would put him close to a New York prison is an extraordinarily dangerous step. And I would hope that there's some legal way to block it and make sure that it never happens, because the thugs he's dealing with are totally out of control, have total contempt for the rule of law, and frankly are unworthy of being in the offices they hold.
Newt Gingrich literally said on Fox News with a straight face and compared what this rich, privileged, demon-possessed individual, Donald Trump, is dealing with in a New York City courtroom is akin to what civil rights workers went through in some of the most brutal conditions of racial hatred in American history. Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman were beaten, shot to death, mutilated, bodies disposed. What's crazy is that when the FBI was searching for their bodies, they uncovered other bodies of folks who had been disposed of. When we start talking about the homes of black people that were blown up in Florida, in Mississippi, in Alabama, numerous places, when we talk about folks who were brutalized, who were sodomized, who were sexually assaulted, who were lynched, who had their private parts cut off, you actually have the audacity to crap on their legacy by comparing them to this charlatan who comes to court in a blue suit and a long-ass red tie, who comes in with Secret Service protection, who goes and sleeps in his 10,000 square foot home, who travels to Florida on his private plane to Mar-a-Lago to pal around with a bunch of other rich-ass folks and celebrate giving them tax breaks? You, Newt Gingrich, a so-called historian, literally goes on Fox News and tries to compare with this shameless individual who paid off a porn star who he cheated on with against his wife, had his attorney Michael Cohen make the payments, a man who has lied, who has cheated on his taxes, who tried to overturn an election, who continues to lie about the election, and you have the audacity to compare him to black civil rights workers and white folks of conscience around the country who are fighting for the right to vote. Black people who were prevented from being a part of the Democratic delegation at Atlantic City in 1964. The folks who were shut out of public office all across Mississippi. The people who were condemned, who were chastised, who had their crops destroyed. Folks who were thrown in jail. When you talk about some of the most heinous things, when you had black young folks put in Parchman prison, when you had a young black woman who was viciously beaten so bad, her face was double the size of her face normally. Her eyes were almost coming out of her head. Her lip was busted, and all she could simply say was freedom. When they sang songs in jails, when they came up missing, when parents prayed that their kids would come home every single night out of fear, they would run into Klansmen. You, Newt Gingrich, you have the audacity to invoke those people. Shame on your punk ass for having the gall to raise that. Of all the things that black folks have done in this country, putting lives on the line, and this sorry, no good son of a bitch who couldn't even go to the war because he faked so-called bone spurs in his feet. The man who has shamed POWs, the man who has spit on the folks who have died, according to his former chief of staff, John Kelly, when he wouldn't even go to their graves. You literally raised that. When Army veteran Medgar Evers was shot and killed, assassinated, getting out of his car, and he died on his doorstep with his wife and children, yelling and screaming, and it was Byron Della Beckwith who actually did it, you literally said that crap? Oh, hell no. There's no way in the world I could sit here as a conscious black man and allow you, Newt Gingrich, a truly pathetic individual, to invoke those people. They are American heroes. They are American sheroes. They are the individuals who made this country truly live up to, as Dr. King said, be true to what you put on paper. And you are not going to sit there on Fox News and make that type of comment and invoke their name and their fight and their legacy to compare it to this, yes, son of a bitch, Donald Trump. Because that's exactly what he is. That man has no morals, no values, no principles, no ethics. He stands for nothing. He fights for nobody. He only cares about himself. And you sit here and actually say somebody need to call the Supreme Court to put a stop to this? I thought y'all cared about law and order. I thought y'all cared about what's right. Y'all sure as hell kept wanting to put Hillary Clinton in jail. But I hope everybody now understands what we're dealing with. So all y'all folk out there who are like, hey, you know what? I kind of like Trump. When DJ Academic sits there and interviews Donald Trump Jr. and talks about, oh, I like how he talks tough. That man don't give a damn about you or nobody else. And Newt Gingrich, you say that? Nah. You are not going to even remotely associate those heroes with this gutless piece of crap. And that's who Donald Trump is. Mustafa.
You know, Donald Trump is devoid of light. it's like a black hole that continues to pull everything because its gravitational pull becomes stronger and stronger and stronger because it's feeding on the energy around him. And for Newt Gingrich, who has been around for a long time and who has actually seen talented individuals who may have been in the Republican Party, to continue to uplift this individual who, as you said, cares about no one, speaks volumes about where their party currently is and how if they don't begin to address it, that it will continue to unravel this country. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with being supportive of a party if it is not doing things to deconstruct, to bring havoc, to actually put people's lives in danger. You know, Donald Trump has never had to sacrifice for anything, but has sacrificed many individuals for his own personal gains. And for Newt Gingrich to continue to feed into this, once again, speaks to how the particular party at the moment's moral compass is broken at best or no longer has any moral value to add to this democratic thing that we are trying to figure out how we get it right. So, you know, I hope folks will educate themselves, and I hope that they will begin to actually look for individuals who are focused on trying to uplift our country, who are trying to make sure that those who have never had a voice now have a voice, and try and make sure that we're creating something better for our children and our children's children. But by the current sets of activities they're doing, they're falling short at best.
Donald Trump has absolutely no redeeming value whatsoever, Joy, not one. And the reason this even ticks me off, because when I talk about the black civil rights workers, when you talk about Fannie Lou Hamer, when you talk about Bob Moses, when you talk about all these individuals, it's not just black people. It's so many other folk who put their lives on the line, who actually were willing to stand up and fight to end Jim Crow, to end segregation in this country. And so this so-called fight Donald Trump is in, paying off a porn star, you can't even remotely compare that to the battle against Jim Crow. Go to my iPad, Henry. This is a white man, y'all, who on this day in 1963, his name is William Moore. He was from Mississippi, but he had moved to Baltimore. He was found dead, as you see right here. This is from the Equal Justice Institute. On April 23rd, 1963, William L. Moore was found dead on U.S. Highway 11 near Attala, Alabama, 4 days shy of his 36th birthday. He was a white man in the midst of a one-man civil rights march to Jackson, Mississippi, to implore Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett to support integration efforts. He wore signs that read, "End segregation in America, eat at Joe's, both black and white, and equal rights for all, Mississippi or bust." He was a resident of Baltimore, a member of the Congress of Racial Equality. On his first protest, he walked to Annapolis, Maryland from Baltimore. On his second march, he walked to the White House. For what proved to be his final march, he planned his walk from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Jackson. Donald Trump, nowhere, anyway, anyhow, Joy, should ever be mentioned in the same breath as this courageous white man, William Moore.
That's right. And keep in mind, Newt Gingrich was an older man. So he's not talking about a bygone era that he doesn't remember. He was a contemporary of some of these civil rights leaders, champions, people who marched, or who was immediately their junior, right? Immediately the inheritor of that generation. And while he often tries to erase it from his resume, he started off as a Rockefeller Republican, right? A more moderate Republican, the era that we don't even think about now. Mr. Rockefeller would be appalled at who he has become, and would have known at that time, as the young Newt knew at that time, that Donald Trump and anyone in his league, including the current version of Newt Gingrich, are not fit to utter the names across their lips of any of the people who died, who fought, who bled, who cried during the civil rights movement. He ought to be ashamed of himself.
John Quayle, he's from Georgia. He knows better. Now, if he wants to look like a fool and go defend Donald Trump, I don't care. You can do whatever. But what you're not going to do is invoke civil rights workers in Mississippi in the 60s, and nobody say a thing?
Listen, that was another difficult thing to watch, right? Because the civil rights movement, you know, Donald Trump has, during the course of his campaign, has made references about why the blacks support him, right? Is because he is facing discrimination by all of these lawsuits. However, the civil rights movement, we were fighting for basic humane rights, right? The ability to walk in the front of a restaurant, the ability to be able to sit and eat at a restaurant with people that look diverse to us, right? The ability to attend universities, to be a part of anything, right? To be able to do, we were fighting to be able to do anything, to even be able to drink from the same water fountain as someone else, right? And amongst others, you know, you have Emmett Till, which was a teenager that was castrated and dragged by vehicles. And so, you know, it's very difficult to watch. It's very insulting to even make that comparison. For the two shouldn't even be in the same sentence, because you're comparing someone who is privileged and someone who has committed crimes, allegedly, right, until he's found guilty. And he's going through the criminal justice system like everyone else that commits crimes. But you can't compare these crimes that he is being prosecuted for with us fighting for basic human rights. There's nothing similar.
Nothing.
And frankly, you know, the fact that there are any types of mentions that Black people support him because of the discrimination that he's facing it's a horrific thing to even have to listen to or to watch.
Oh, well, actually, it's insane.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
Whoa, Nelly! Guess what? Arizona has handed down indictments regarding the fake elector scheme tied to the 2020 election. Among those folks who have been indicted, Rudy Giuliani, Boris Epstein, Mark Meadows. Here is Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays with the announcement of the indictment.
Hi, I'm Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays. Let me start by thanking everyone for your patience as we conducted a thorough and professional investigation over the past 13 months into the fake elector scheme in our state. I understand for some of you today didn't come fast enough, and I know I'll be criticized by others for conducting this investigation at all. But as I have stated before and will say here again today, I will not allow American democracy to be undermined. It's too important. The investigators and attorneys assigned to this case took the necessary time to thoroughly piece together the details of the events that began nearly 4 years ago. They followed the facts where they led, and I'm very proud of the work they've done to date. We're here because justice demands an answer to the efforts that the defendants and other unindicted co-conspirators allegedly took to undermine the will of Arizona's voters during the 2020 presidential election. Arizona's election was free and fair. The people of Arizona elected President Biden. Unwilling to accept this fact, the defendants charged by the state grand jury allegedly schemed to prevent the lawful transfer of the presidency. Whatever their reasoning was, the plot to violate the law must be answered for, and I was elected to uphold the law of this state. The scheme, had it succeeded, would have deprived Arizona's voters of their right to have their votes counted for their chosen president. It effectively would have made their right to vote meaningless.
Now, 11 people have been indicted. 7 others have been indicted. And the 11 folks who were indicted, let me read this here, were 11 Republicans who participated in the certificate signing. Now, remember, in Michigan, the Attorney General there filed felony charges against 16 Republicans who they classified as fake electors. The Washington Post is, give me 1 second, I want to pull this story up because the Washington Post is reporting because the 7 other names were redacted in the news here. But give me 1 second. I'm pulling up the Post right now. So let me pull this story up. I'm just going to go through it with you right here. Let me pull it up here. And so their headline says, Meadows, Giuliani, and other Trump allies charged in Arizona 2020 election probe. This is a huge development. Rebecca?
This absolutely is a huge development. What's really interesting, especially for this to happen in the state of Arizona, is that we know Arizona is one of the top swing states, and this is definitely going to have a ripple effect within even what we expect at the national level with the Electoral College, with seeing where those numbers are going to lie. So what's also interesting, this is on the heels of now being of abortion and reproductive rights being a major issue in the state of Arizona, especially with the ruling that said that the state is able to go back to, I believe, 1864, 1863 particular laws around reproductive. Thank you, 1864, around reproductive laws. So this is going to be a 1-2 punch that's going to really energize what we're going to see happening over the next few months. I'll be interested to see what the organizers on the ground that's trying to register more people to vote, but also get people to understand, even if you're not completely enthused about who's on the top of the ticket, Trump versus Biden, this now elevates this issue in a way of, hey, this is beyond Trump versus Biden, but this is about which type of administration do you want to see holding the White House come November 6th? So what's really interesting is that this is going to be a real opportunity for folks to be able to mobilize people and actually not convince people who are undecided. It's really that people aren't undecided about who they want to vote for, but they're undecided with whether or not they're going to vote. So I think this is actually going to be positive with getting some of those folks who are undecided if they were going to go and vote November 6th and actually convert them to actually vote on November 6th.
Robert, keep in mind Biden won Arizona by 10,000 votes. This is what the Washington Post says. Here we go to my iPad. Those indicted include former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, attorneys Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, John Eastman, and Christina Bobb, top campaign advisor Boris Epstein, and former campaign aide Mike Roman. They are accused of allegedly aiding an unsuccessful strategy to award the state's electoral votes to Trump instead of Biden after the 2020 election. Also charged are the Republicans who signed paperwork on December 14, 2020 that falsely purported Trump was the rightful winner, including former state party chair Kelly Ward, state senators Jake Hoffman and Anthony Kern, and Tyler Bowyer, a GOP national committee man and chief operating officer of Turning Point Action, the campaign arm of the pro-Trump conservative group Turning Point USA. Trump was not charged, but he is described in the indictment as an unindicted co-conspirator. Robert, your thoughts?
This is interesting because it falls along with many of the other cases where similar issues were charged, such as in Fulton County and in Michigan, as was said previously. But this one, you have an added wrinkle because many of the people who are indicted in this case have already taken plea deals in other cases. For example, Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell, Eastman, those sorts of individuals. So it's going to be interesting to see how exactly those other plea deals play into these charges in other jurisdictions around the country, because if they're they're accused of many of the same actions under many of the same statutes. We could see these people basically just parading around the country taking plea deals to these cases. I also think it's very interesting they chose not to indict Trump in the case, because in other similar cases, they have decided to indict the former president, and primarily because the way that it's done in other states is to try to get plea deals out of the lower tier individuals who are involved in the conspiracy in order to get the bigger fish. In Arizona, they didn't charge it that way. They charged these as individual crimes as opposed to being part of larger conspiracies. So we're going to have a nice exercise over the course of the next 18 months to 2 years as these cases get litigated. So what's a more effective prosecutorial strategy, charging individuals in these large RICO cases, these large organized crime cases, as they would be, conspiracy cases, or these individual charges against defendants when it comes to getting these things done? But I would love for our conservative friends to just simply mount the defense of, I didn't do it. We're going to be exonerated by the court system. We understand the concerns by the state. Everything we did was consistent with the Constitution and statutory laws. Instead of the courts against us is a conspiracy. Everyone's coming down. The Legion of Doom, it's the Darth Vaders, the Sith Lords, all coming against me at one time, as opposed to simply saying we'll be exonerated by the court system, because that's what you say when you're actually innocent. You only talk about conspiracies when you don't have any other defense.
Tyler, this is the you see right here. This is the Post story. This is the second round of charges for Meadows, Giuliani, Ellis, Eastman, and Roman, who were all indicted alongside Trump in Georgia last year. Ellis pleaded guilty in October to illegally conspiring to overturn Trump's 2020 election loss in Georgia and has been cooperating with prosecutors. This is the first time Epstein, now a top 2024 campaign aide who frequently talks with the former president, has been charged for his alleged actions after the 2020 election. That right there, again, shows you what happens. And keep in mind, this is also why voting matters, because that attorney general, she barely won election there in Arizona to be the attorney general.
Yeah, I will echo that same thing. You know, voting has consequences, and who you put in office determines the level of their work. And as we see here, clearly, this is an administration that will hold, as mentioned by my panelists mentioned, will hold any White House accountable. But as I think about, giving out indictments, I can't help but think about Oprah when she was giving out them cards and said, "You get indictment, you get indictment, you get indictment." So I'm just hoping that that this accountability will continue to roll, and I'm eager to see how this will translate to other states, and as we're seeing in the case in New York.
Last point for everybody who said that the case in Georgia that really didn't mean anything. Check this out. Arizona prosecutors and investigators met in December with Kenneth Chesbrough, an attorney and an architect of the electoral strategy, who pleaded guilty in Georgia in October to a single felony count of participating in a conspiracy to file false documents. Chesbrough provided May's team with records, some that had been previously unseen, that revealed more information about those involved in the Arizona effort, according to two people familiar with the investigation, who requested anonymity to talk about the sensitive conversations. After that, they said the Arizona investigation widened. That, to me, Rebecca, sounds like somebody named Kenneth Chesbrough, who's like, I am not trying to lose more money with legal fees. I ain't trying to get an indictment. Hey, I'm a snitch on everybody. Here y'all go. Hit a phone, hit a text, hit all kind of stuff. Just leave my ass out of this.
Yeah, so even continue with connecting the dots on what Robert was saying is that once we have these other people who've started to take plea deals, at this point, we probably have some of those same folks who are helping to turn state's evidence. So there is actually credible reasons with why these people are being indicted and why these people are more than likely going to be convicted. I still find it interesting that even in this, I wonder if it was a political calculation with not charging Trump in this as well, because it seems like there is enough information here, especially with him being labeled as a unindicted co-conspirator. They are saying in the charging documents that he is still a co-conspirator. And so I'm wondering if it is a political calculation not to charge him here, or is there something else that's coming down the pipeline in Arizona where there's a possibility of Trump being charged with additional crimes. But bottom line, this is going to definitely rock what we're going to see happening in Arizona.
Robert, I would surmise that by not charging him, being a co-conspirator is different than having a direct engagement in the illegal activity. The reason he was indicted in Georgia was because of the phone calls that he made. Those were explicit involvement, as opposed to maybe being aware of these things and not saying anything, as opposed to being an architect of trying to actually make it happen.
Well, I think we can think about this along the lines of has not been indicted yet, to Rebecca's point, because what could happen in this case is that as more and more of the people who are charged decide to start taking plea agreements, that becomes the basis for additional charges that are filed later against President Trump. As you said, in Arizona, you don't have the smoking gun that you had in Michigan and Georgia, the direct phone call in Georgia from President Trump to the Secretary of State, in Michigan from President Trump and Ronna McDowell to the campaign workers there talking about the efforts to overturn the election. Because of that, it may be a situation where prosecutors are looking for additional evidence to come through the plea bargain process. Thereby, they can build a case that they can run up the ladder and then have a superseding indictment to bring in more defendants later on, whether that be Trump or other people involved in the campaign. I think what's crucial, however, is to ensure that the entire process is done in such a way that the American people can have faith in the outcome of these hearings and these proceedings. Because right now, what we're having is very much a siloing of information. If Judge Cannon in Florida does something that people disagree with, the entire system is rigged. She's a Trump judge. You can't trust anything coming out of it. If the judge in New York does something, the entire system is rigged. That is a liberal Obama judge. And you can't have a system that operates in such a way where people only believe in the decisions that come down in their favor. And that's why it's important to have the legitimacy of the court be paramount in these judges' eyes when it comes to making these determinations.
Again, folks, breaking news out of Arizona. 11 Republicans have been charged for their participation in the fake elector scheme. There are 7 other people whose names have not been released. They were redacted from the indictment because they have not been served the indictment. But according to the Washington Post, they include Mark Meadows, former Donald Trump chief of staff, Rudy Giuliani, one of his attorneys, Jenna Ellis, one of his attorneys, John Eastman, one of his attorneys, and Boris Epstein, who worked on his campaign. We will certainly bring you more details as they come forth.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
Isn't it amazing to keep listening to white men whine and complain about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Well, recently, screenwriter David Mamet did so at the Los Angeles Book Festival, and he really sounded like a complete ass with his whining. And so I saw this story and I said, oh my goodness, we got to go ahead and play for this because I got a few words. Check this out.
You sort of allude to the idea that it's possible that the sort of pendulum has shifted too far, and that, you know, there are people who say agree with you who are sort of boxed out because of the sort of because of the thinking behind diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. Do you feel like it is putting limits on the quality of the work or on other, other groups, like making an impact in Hollywood?
I don't know what groups make an impact in Hollywood, right? No, people talk about movies and the movies have to change our lives. No movie ever changed anybody's life. They're flickering images on a screen. They existed originally so that we could go, so that some Jew who got tired of being a tailor would put up a screen and he would show the movie, and eventually they came out here and started the movie business. They're there to entertain us. I don't need someone to educate me. It's the same thing as a sign that says gender neutral bathroom. What's the difference between gender neutral bathroom and bathroom? Who does bathroom exclude? So what does gender neutral bathroom do, right? It politicizes the human excretory function. It's the same thing with DEI. It's fascist totalitarianism. Leave me a fucking alone. That's what I say.
Right, so he actually said a lot more than that. The folks at the LA Times actually have a story on that where he talked about a variety of things. And so one of the things he said that, go to my iPad, Henry, he talked about the Academy Awards now requiring having some diversity standards. He goes, the idea that I can't give you a stupid effing statue unless you have 7% of this, 8% of this, it's intrusive. Now, it says here that Mamet acknowledged that discrimination barred groups from participating in Hollywood for years. He thinks the pendulum has swung too far in the opposite direction. He describes the leaders of these diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives as diversity capos and diversity commissars. And I love this here. The film industry has little business improving everybody's racial understanding, as does the fire department, Mamet said to a few loud laughs in the crowd. He argued that his colleagues are better off selling popcorn than trying to improve representation for women, queer talent, and other marginalized groups. Okay. Complained about bathrooms. We heard that. And then he went on to talk about some other deals. But he also was interesting. Does Mamet think of his children as Nepo babies who benefited from his illustrious career? Not at all, he said. He feels gratified that they've learned from being on set with him. Quote, they earned it by merit, he said of daughter Zojia Mamet, who starred in Girls. They haven't benefited from any type of privilege, he said. And he thinks that DEI initiatives are taking away hard-earned opportunities. Quote, nobody ever gave my kids a job because of who they were related to. Okay, allow me to unpack this. So I'll start here. You heard in the clip, he talked about how a Jew created Hollywood, how they came out west. In fact, there's a book that's really a great book, which is an award-winning book. It's called An Empire of Their Own. It's how the Jews invented Hollywood. Fantastic book. Takes you through the history of Hollywood. But you know what's going to happen when you read that book? You're going to read about how those same founders of Hollywood actually had considerable racism in Hollywood. How they froze out African Americans, not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera. Those same individuals blocked advancement of African Americans. The early portrayals of black folks, you had folks in blackface, white actors in blackface. And then when you did have black actors, you had them as some of the most clueless individuals talking like this. And then you also had the black people who just played maids and butlers. Yep. That was that same Hollywood. And those things continued through the decades. You begin to see these things change when you begin to see advancement with civil rights. But see, here's the thing that's interesting that you would think a screenwriter who's 76 years old would understand. Do you realize that movies and music is really America's greatest export? What I mean by that is, as we do this show right now, there are people who are watching this show who are not in the United States. There are people in this show who are watching in India, who are watching in the UK, who are watching from Canada, who are watching from Jamaica, or the Bahamas who are watching from different countries. If I pulled up the YouTube the dashboard, I will show you the folks who are watching all around the world. And do you know what media has done? Media has actually shaped the perspective of how people view Americans through the mediums. And so if you lived overseas in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s up to present day, your view of America was shaped through what you saw in the movies. This is the same Hollywood that when 12 Years a Slave came out, Chiwetel was removed from the poster overseas and Brad Pitt was put on the poster. I'm sorry, wasn't Chiwetel Ejiofor the star of the film because he was the one who was 12 years a slave? So even in that movie, they took the brother off and put Brad Pitt on because for so long, Hollywood say, yeah, we can't market black people overseas. We can't market black movies. But 2/3 of the world is people of color. That thing called racism in Hollywood. And so what David says here is that I think the pendulum has swung too far. I'm sorry. You mean to tell me when you have movies that are largely, and when I say largely, I'm talking 80 and 90% directed by white men? And then when you have all white writers' rooms, and then when you have all white production rooms, and when you have folk who hire their friends and they lock people out, I'm sorry, explain to me the pendulum has swung. Let me help y'all out. If the pendulum is over here and it's 90% white, if you say the pendulum has swung too far, that means it's now 90% black Latino. That's not the case. See, really what David is saying is, damn it, we don't have all the jobs anymore. Damn, we now gotta compete. They now are creating programs that are forcing us to have to now talk to other people who don't look like us in order for them to get hired. And it is driving white people crazy. There's a reason I wrote my book, White Fear, how the browning of America is making white folks lose their minds. Because they now have to compete. And so David Mamet, who's 76 years old, he can't stand the fact that a young black writer who in the history of Hollywood was frozen out and the only way he could get onto a lot was if there was a broom in his hand, now has access. See, he says in here that, it's taking away hard-earned opportunities. Really? Really? In the same breath, how he says his kids earned it. Watch me now. Watch me now. His kids earned it by merit from being on set with him. So you mean daddy brought daughter to work every day, or sons to work, they now have access to the system because of daddy. Then he says, nobody ever gave my kids a job because of who they were related to. Do y'all understand that the best way for you to get a job in the NFL to be a coach is to be related to one? The tree of NFL coaches that are sons and nephews of other coaches is tremendous. It even happens in the booth, the broadcast booth. Phil Simms, followed by his son Chris Simms, who flamed out at quarterback, but now he's a top announcer. Multiple folks named Albert who are announcers. Multiple people named Buck who are announcers. How many black people, David, have an opportunity to come to the set every day. And let's just be real. David Mamet, I think that's how his name is pronounced, is a legendary screenwriter. Are you trying to convince me that if your last name was Mamet and you asked for a meeting in Hollywood, the first question they would not ask is your daddy David? You damn right you're going to get a meeting. Oh, you're probably going to get a meeting because you're going to receptions and parties with your daddy, and you now are meeting the elite of Hollywood. You're now meeting the folks who greenlight films. You're now meeting the folks who produce films. You're meeting the folks who direct films. And so there's no doubt that they are going to hook up David Mamet's daughter with an opportunity because of who her daddy is. And see, I love this here. I love this. They learned from me. They learned from me by being on set every day. Quote, they earned it by merit. Michael Jordan had sons. He's arguably the greatest basketball player ever. They sat next to him every day. They went to games with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's sons can't play like Michael Jordan. So this idea that just because your kids came with you, just somehow that makes them amazing and highly talented because they came to work with you. But see, what the David Mamets don't want to confront is your family is getting the hookup because of you. And Hollywood is all about the hookup. Who do you know? What the Mamets cannot stand. See, I'm staying on that. The pendulum has swung too far. Y'all, this is the pendulum. This is how far it swung. Oh, let me go back. This is the pendulum. This is how far it swung. Not here, not halfway, not here, not here. It was here, and it swung right here. Oh, they're taking away hard-earned opportunities. What the haters of DEI don't like is that they have had this thing to themselves. Y'all, I'm in the media business. You think I'm lying? If I ask Henry to come out here right now and say, Henry, you worked in production for 30 years who in DC. You've worked at all of these places. NBC, ABC, CBS, C-SPAN, all of these people. When we had the TV One show, y'all, during TV One, we contracted the studio out with News Channel. And I was in there one day. Now, mind you, we're a black-owned network. And I'm sitting here, and I had to ask the question, why is nearly everybody I see as a technician non-black? Now, we had a couple of black folks who ran cameras, but the folks in audio, the folks in video playback, the folks in lighting, the folk in other areas of production, there were very few black people. Because you know why? Because so-and-so would say, well, I got a buddy. I got a buddy. I got a buddy. That's how jobs get filled. We've frozen out of those economic opportunities. Very few African Americans. Look, I'm going to be straight up. When we launched this show, all of my audio technicians were black. I said, Henry, you got to tell my man he gonna go have to hire some black people to train them how to do audio. Here's my whole point. You cannot change the game unless you bring in folk, and you can't depend on folks' good nature to do it. John Landgraf, who was the president of FX, he said that. I've talked about him beforehand. John Landgraf saw it. He said, I cannot have 90% of my showrunners and directors being white men. He said, quote, I love my white men. He said, but my job is to produce content for a diversified audience. If all of my content, if all of my writers, my showrunners, my directors are coming from the same perspective, then I'm not going to be able to appeal to a broader audience, and they will not be able to watch my shows. Therefore, my ratings will not be able to go up. My shows will not win awards. I will not be able to generate ratings. I will not be able to increase advertising, and then I'm going to be out of a job. So John Landgraf said this got to change. Within a year, numbers had changed. Because you know what happened? Because they were forced to do so, they were forced to go talk to women, white women. They were forced to go find black folks and Latinos. Chris Rock called out Lorne Michaels at Saturday Night Live. Chris Rock said, y'all keep going to the same two places to get the same people to be on Saturday Night Live. Y'all go to Second City, or y'all go to the same white comedy clubs. He said, y'all don't go to the black comedy clubs. Y'all don't see the amazing black talent. He said, because y'all keep going to the same people and the same places. Chris said, y'all are gonna have to go to some other places in order to do that. I don't have the name of it right now. Y'all find it for me. But there was a famous black comedy club in Los Angeles. And guess what? All the white comedy clubs, Laugh In, Laugh Factory, that's where all the white comics. The black comics couldn't go there. If you go to Amazon Prime Video, I think it's Amazon or Hulu, my man, Guy Torrey, they have a documentary called Fat Tuesdays. Because what happened was the black comedy club where Robin Harris was, that's where all the black talent was. They couldn't get to the white comedy club. They were frozen out of the white comedy clubs, except for a few black people. Guy Torrey created Fat Tuesday, which allowed the black comedians to have one night, and for the white talent folk to come see them. That's how many of them got shows. If God doesn't create that, then you don't put them in front of the folk who are picking the people to do television shows, sitcoms, and movies. And also fill writers' rooms. See, the David Mamets, what they can't stand is, they can't stand the fact that what the Academy is now saying is, y'all have to do this. We're going to force you to do this because, David, we can't depend on folk doing this thing the right way. And that's really what DEI does. And see, this is very simple to anybody white who opposes DEI. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. See, now, don't come talk to me about hard-earned opportunities and how some folks getting frozen out when y'all been freezing us out for more than 100 years. Now, all of a sudden, y'all want to talk about merit. Now, all of a sudden, y'all want to talk about, oh, so-and-so deserves it? Do you really want to have that conversation? The number of talented, smart black people who were kept out of medical schools, kept out of law schools, kept out of writers' rooms, kept off of the stage, kept out of numerous jobs, and now all of a sudden, a couple of black people and Latinos, and let's be real clear, the greatest beneficiary of DEI has been white women. Now, because the room is no longer white male faces, oh my God, the pendulum has simply swung too far. Really? Is that what you're saying? Now, a lot of these DEI initiatives are BS because the leadership is not fully committed to making it possible. Nelson Peltz, who was one of the folks investing, he was trying to take down Bob Iger at Disney. Why do I have to see movies with an all-female cast? Why do I have to see movies with an all-black cast? But your white ass sure didn't mind them black dollars for Black Panther when it hit $1 billion. See, y'all, he was upset because they said, maybe we should start making movies and folk actually see themselves on it and they might be interested. Everybody swore Barbie was going to be a massive failure. It's too feminist. You know what's not feminist? Green. You know what not racist? Green. It's amazing how money sure can change a lot of people's view. But here's the crazy thing about Hollywood, David Mamet. A study was done that said Hollywood could generate an additional $10 billion a year if they embrace diversity. And there are still people fighting it. So what does that tell you? What they're saying is, well, hell, if that means more money, we still don't give a damn. And my last point before I go to my panel on this, and that is I need y'all to understand that DEI only works when leadership says it's a priority. When leadership says this is going to happen. So David Mamet, if you don't like the standards that the Academy has put in, why don't you sit down with your friends who are writers and showrunners and directors and producers and studio heads and say, why have y'all been blocking Black and Latino and Asian and Native American and white female talent all these years? Why is this a boys' club? Why do we have writers' rooms for movies, the comedy movies, where they only would go to the Hasty Pudding at Harvard and draft them? They wouldn't go to some of the great HBCUs and say, man, there's some funny people writing down here. No, they will only go to the folks who were there at Harvard. That became, literally, if you wrote there, you got hired in Hollywood. It was just automatic. They have been freezing us out of the opportunities and the money for decades. And the David Mamets are now mad because the door is open. You say well earned. This is real simple. James Brown said it best. Don't hand me nothing. Open the door and get it myself. The David Mamets of the world hate the fact that the door is now opened. Well, guess what, David? We here. And when that door gets cracked open, we gonna swing that sumbitch real wide. And we gonna bring in a whole bunch of folk with us. And you know what else, David? We now have access to our own platforms. We don't have to go through the traditional Hollywood film industry. Ask George Lucas when he made Red Tails. George Lucas, Mr. Star Wars, George Lucas, George $4 billion Lucas. He literally went to the big seven, and every single Hollywood studio turned him down because they said Red Tails did not have white heroes. And George Lucas said, but the heroes are the black soldiers. And they said, we need white heroes. And that is why George Lucas invested $60 million of his own money to finish Red Tails. And George Lucas is on the record as saying, I now know for a very small moment what it feels like to be a black director in Hollywood and have the door slammed in front of you because the heroes of your movie are not white, they are black. But I guess David Mamet, I guess he didn't read that story. Because probably if you're talking about black subjects, he's not interested. Final comment from my panel. Jonquil, you first.
Well, you know, the whole thing with DEI is that there's this assumption that because the door is open, that you lack the skills and the talent to do that job and be the best at that job. I think that's one of the things that's left out quite often. And secondarily, media is one of the most powerful forms of influence in the world, right? We're talking about television, film, music. I mean, what is portrayed on television, what we consume on a daily basis affects how we view each other, and it affects how others across the world view us. And it is very important that there is diversity on screen, and that I respectfully disagree with his sentiments about movies don't change people's lives. There are people that have There's articles that I have written where music has saved people, movies, television series have saved people. People have learned emergency techniques from the media just from watching scripted television shows. And so I just said all that to say that diversity is important. And just like you stated, just because the door is open, you're just giving me the opportunity. But that does not mean that I am not the most qualified to do that job.
Joy.
Let me tell you, the door isn't open far enough, but it's open just enough for us to know what to do with people like David. David, I wish you difficult times in getting your movies made. Not only is he a screenwriter, he's also a director. Who would want to work with a person like that? If you were over one of these major productions, you are an employer. Who would believe that he is not discriminating against them with language and talk like that? Any insurance company that's looking to support one of his films should think twice. David is from a bygone era, and maybe his last movie has been made.
Mustafa closes out.
Black excellence and Black talent has always scared many people in America. As we came out of the Reconstruction period, then they began to create these films like Birth of a Nation, first one ever shown at the White House, that began to reframe who we are and our experiences and the value that they did not see us bringing to America. Then you fast forward to modern times. You know, we remember the words of Miss Fannie Lou Hamer when she said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." That is a set of experiences that many people of color in Hollywood had to go through. No matter how talented they were, no matter how excellent they were, they still couldn't get the sets of opportunities. But the pendulum is slowly swinging, and we find opportunities now, as you said, on so many different types of platforms to make sure that people cannot deny the excellence that we bring forward, the ingenuity, the innovation. So as we have always, when we began to make progress, folks have tried to find ways, either both subtly or in your face, to slow that down. But no longer are you going to be able to do that, because we are going to not only embrace our excellence, but we're going to make sure that the world knows it in every form and fashion that it exists.
Gotta love it. The pendulum has swung too far.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
Listen to me clearly here. When I say that there is an attack, a very clear attack on workers, on poor, low-income workers, believe it when I tell you this. Go to my iPad. In Louisiana, lawmakers voted to remove a law requiring lunch breaks for child workers. Florida and Texas passed laws prohibiting cities from passing laws requiring water breaks for folk who work outdoors. So when we talk about Medicaid expansion, we talk about, again, who are these people? These are the working class, the working poor, low-income people. These are the type of attacks that Republican legislatures are leading. See, here's the whole deal. All y'all folk who like, man, you sitting here, you on the plantation, you shilling for the Democrats, you just trying to make us vote Democrat. I'm stating fact. Literally. The headline, boom. Since the Republicans got a supermajority in Louisiana, it's right here. Louisiana lawmakers vote to remove lunch breaks for child workers, cut unemployment benefits. A House committee approved the bill along with others to reduce unemployment benefits and workers' compensation wages. So see, for all y'all, you're just trying to make us vote Democrat. You shilling for the Democrats. These are Republicans. These are Republicans. In Louisiana, Democrats can't stop it. They got a supermajority in the House and the Senate, and they got a MAGA Republican governor. See, some of y'all think I'm just joking. No, I ain't. I'm telling y'all what the real deal is, what's going on. In the next segment, I'm gonna show you what they're doing when it comes to cops. Not Democrats, Republicans. But see, some of y'all playing games with this election. And some of y'all want to flirt with Trump. Y'all, they are doing this state by state by state and want to do it on a federal level. But again, go ahead and play games if you want to and see what I'm talking about. I'm going to go to a break and we're going to play this video here. The Poor People's Campaign had their, kill the music. The Poor People's Campaign had their, of course, march, kill the music, please. Poor People's Campaign had their march where they went to state capitals. This was on March 2nd. But they're going to be doing this in June as well. But I want y'all to listen. I want y'all to listen to the video, and I want y'all to listen to the potential voting power of poor and low income and working class people. And how poor, low income and working class people, if they, one, are targeted, if they are organized and mobilized, they can determine the outcomes of elections all across the South, the Midwest, the Southwest, hell, the whole country. The voting bloc is real if politicians actually pay attention to them. Play it.
To pay my bills since I've been working at 16 years old. I work full-time 64 hours a week, 7 days a week. I am exhausted.
Our government finds it necessary to ban abortion, to say that they are saving our children. But more children die as a result of poverty in this country.
We should not be cornered and forced to choose one necessity over another.
This is the consequences that we face. So what our people say is that we are fighting the oldest evil.
No matter how you call the holy, all of our sacred texts compel us to create a world in which there is enough for us all.
in the face of a distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism, we declare that silence is betrayal.
We gather on these streets in the spirit of the prophet Amos, who declared, hate evil and love good and establish justice.
We heed the charge from the Holy Quran. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist. O you who have believed, be persistent, standing firm in justice, witnesses for God.
Hope comes from the bottom, from those most directly impacted by the profound evils of America.
Our votes are not a show of support. They are a demand.
We will raise our cry and we will call for change because nothing less would be a betrayal of our sacred commitment.
We are here. We are the poor and dispossessed, and we are here.
Until children are protected, sick folk are healed, low-wage workers are paid, immigrants are treated fairly, affordable houses are provided, until saving the world and diplomacy and living in peace is more important than blowing up the world. We won't be silent anymore. If we've got to march, we'll march. If we've got to engage in nonviolent direct action, we'll engage. If we have to ask workers to make election day a labor strike day, we'll do it. But until then, we won't be silent or unseen or unheard anymore.
Now, again, that's a 42-week campaign, and so the day of mobilization was March 2nd, but this actually continues all across the country. You can go to poorpeoplescampaign.org to get more information. Now,
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
When we say a Republican Party, they don't like black people, this is a perfect example of that. This Tarrant County District Attorney's Office, they have announced that they're going to be appealing last month's ruling by the Texas Appeals Court that overturned the Crystal Mace's 2018 conviction for illegal voting. Now, Crystal Mason was on federal probation for felony conviction in 2016 when she voted in an election with a provisional ballot. Now, she says she didn't know she could not vote. This actually went to court. The folks with the probation folks said in testimony that she didn't know. She was not told. She was convicted anyway. 2 years later of voter fraud and sentenced to 5 years behind bars because state law only allows felons to vote if they have fully finished their sentence, including any parole or supervision requirements. Now, keep in mind, she had to go back to federal prison for violating the terms of her probation, and then they tacked on 2 more years of supervised release. So although she has not gone to state prison, she did have to go back to federal prison because she was indicted. On March 28th, the Texas Second Court of Appeals overturned Mace's conviction because she didn't have, quote, actual knowledge, unquote, that she couldn't vote while on federal supervised release in a tax fraud case. Now, I want to read for you the statement because this is important before I go to her attorney. And it shows you how sadistic and shameful these folks are in Tarrant County, Texas. This is the statement that they released And when I read this for you, you're probably going to say, you got to be kidding me. This is a quote from this statement. The trial court's guilty verdict should be affirmed. Voting is a cornerstone of our democracy. This office will protect the ballot box from fraudsters who think our laws don't apply to them. Crystal Mason, a 4-time felon, was convicted of illegal voting on March 28, 2018 in a bench trial in the 432nd Judicial District Court. She was convicted based on testimony from the election judge and poll clerk that she read the provisional voter affidavit, affirmed that she provided accurate information, signed the affidavit, and testified that the affidavit language was clearly understandable to mean that a convicted felon such as herself was ineligible to vote. On March 28, 2024, the Second Court of Appeals reversed her conviction and published an opinion stating that there was evidence showing Mason may not have known she was ineligible to vote on the day she voted. The Second Court of Appeals failed to give proper deference to the trial court's guilty verdict and reweighted the evidence in favor of Mason. The Second Court of Appeals misapplied the sufficiency standard of review by not viewing the evidence in the light, y'all gonna love this here, by not viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the trial court's verdict, in contravention to binding precedent for the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. The Second Court of Appeals publication of its opinion creates the very real risk that future sufficiency cases will likewise be wrongly analyzed and decided. This office requests that the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals grant review in this case, reverse the Second Court of Appeals decision, and affirm the trial court's guilty verdict. That's from the Chance County DA's office. Kim Cole, Crystal Mason's attorney, joins us right now. Kim, hate to have the fact that we're talking to you again about this case. This has been going on for 8 years. And for people who don't understand, she filed a provisional ballot. The ballot was not even counted. So it wasn't like it actually was included. That's one. They also lie in this statement, Kim, by saying that, oh, she knew this, she knew that. And then they also lie by saying that once there was evidence showing Mason may not have known she was ineligible. This is according to the court. So they're trying to say that they're wrong. There was testimony. Wasn't there actual testimony by a probation officer who said no one told her she couldn't vote? Correct?
That is absolutely correct, Roland. And it wasn't just a probation officer. He was a supervisory probation officer. He was over all the probation officers. And he testified on the stand. And this was their witness. This was not Crystal's witness. This was their witness that they called to the stand. And they asked him point blank, didn't you tell her that she was not eligible to vote? And he said, no, I did not. They conveniently leave out the fact that, they point out that she filled out a provisional ballot, filled out her, correct information. Yes, she did. Filling out a provisional ballot is not illegal. And then they go on, if she did think she was eligible to vote, or she knew she wasn't eligible to vote, who would put their right name on there, the accurate information? Who would sign the ballot if they knew they weren't eligible? She didn't know. And
yeah. And what bothers me here, again, I love this line here, that they misapplied the standard because they should have only reviewed evidence in light most favorable to the trial court's verdict. That's not their job. Their job is to look at the verdict, the prosecution, and the defense, weigh the evidence. So basically, the Tarrant County DA is saying, oh, y'all should overlook anything that doesn't make us look good.
And that's essentially what they're saying. Unfortunately, the hypocrisy is real, because we've seen time and time again that they have absolutely ignored precedent. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are right now with the Roe v. Wade situation, with affirmative action, and numerous other precedent that has provided and expanded rights for minorities. So the hypocrisy is real, right? But that is unfortunately the standard, that anytime there is an appeal, they are to view the evidence in the light most favorable to the upholding the verdict. However, that doesn't mean be ignorant. and they did not prove their case. Their witnesses contradicted each other. And what they also failed to include was that the Second Court of Appeals said that even if she had read the affidavit, there is absolutely no language whatsoever in that affidavit, because Crystal testified that she didn't read it. They're going on her two neighbors' testimony that was inconclusive that she read it. They're like, well, I think she read it. You know, she was moving her finger. Anyway, Crystal did not actually read the affidavit. She was filling out her information, because on one side is the attestation, the other side is where she fills out her information. And she was putting her information on there because they did admonish her that she had to provide accurate information. And she made sure everything matched up with her driver's license. And so that being said, even if she read it, there's nothing in the provisional ballot affidavit that says that if you are A, B, C, and XYZ, you are not eligible to vote. Nothing in there. So how would she have known?
Here's what's also interesting. I mean, here's the deal. So she was convicted of tax fraud. She was inflating returns for her clients in terms of preparing their taxes. Okay, that's why she went. But when you read their press release, Crystal Mason, a 4-time felon. Wasn't that tied to the same case? And so they're trying to give the impression that, oh, this is a repeat offender. This woman is a menace to society.
Yes, that is absolutely. They have continued to persecute and disparage her. Here, what they failed to. Crystal isn't a saint, Roland. I mean, she isn't. Every saint got a past, and every sinner got a future. Okay, so she does have a prior criminal history. Otherwise, she wouldn't even be in this situation to ascertain whether or not she was eligible to vote. Okay, so that's how we landed here. Yes, she is a felon. However, what they failed to acknowledge in stating that she's a 4-time felon, which they also included the one where she was acquitted, this particular case, but we can look past that, right? Yeah. Anyway, in all of her other cases, Crystal pled guilty. She admitted her wrongs, even to the case that got her sent to federal prison. She has no problem holding herself accountable for the things that she's done wrong. Why on earth would she fight for 7 years to prove her innocence, when in all of these other cases, she admitted her guilt because she did something wrong? She was like, I did it. I mean, I'm gonna take accountability for my actions. Here, she didn't know she was not eligible. So she refuses to accept responsibility.
Right. I mean, the thing that jumps out to me is, before I go to Matt and Michael with their questions. Okay, has she gone to state prison? No, but she actually, because of this, she returned to federal prison for 2 years. You would think a common sense DA would say, okay, we've been dealing with this one case for 8 years. They literally are spending more time on this case than they have on heinous crimes that have been committed. So the waste of resources to me is unbelievable. This is, no, we're going to make an example out of this black woman, and this is about creating a chilling effect about anybody else who's formerly incarcerated in voting. The same thing they did when they attacked a black man in Houston who stood in line for 6 hours. And guess what? He was later found that he could vote, and he now says, hey, I'm not going to vote again because of what I went through. That's what this is all about.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. I've said over and over again, in their summation in Crystal's original trial, they said they wanted to send a message to voters, much like their ridiculous, disparaging, inaccurate statement that they released yesterday. They are trying to send a message. They are trying to, quote unquote, protect the ballot box, as if, of course, Roland, you know where that comes from, as if folk like us shouldn't be there. And so they are absolutely still trying to send the same message. 7 years later, 8 years later, we're coming up on another election. 8 years later, they're still trying to send the same message. They don't want folks who look like Crystal at the ballot box. They are trying to protect the ballot box, not from fraudsters, because let's be honest, we've seen the documentation of who was committing all the voter fraud in the past few elections. They don't look like Crystal. So they're not trying to protect the ballot box from from fraudsters. They're trying to protect the ballot box from those who have been typically disenfranchised by this system. And that is the whole point of them continuing to beat this dead horse.
And correct me if I'm wrong. There was a Texas Justice of the Peace, Russ Casey, who admitted to forging signatures to get on the primary ballot. And he pled guilty to records tampering. He resigned. That happened in 2018. These folks are spending more time, and he was an elected official. They're spending more time going after her than they did going after somebody like him.
Yes.
And in fact, before that, and he was sentenced to 2 years in jail, but it was probated over 5 years. But they want to send her to prison.
They absolutely want to send her to prison because they want people who look like her. They want to protect the ballot box from folks who look like her and you and me, and want to send, and Mr. Rogers down there in Houston. They want people that look like us to fear that they may suffer the same fate. Look at what all they're doing. Look at all of the taxpayer money they're spending to put an innocent woman in prison. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Matt Manning, your question.
So, Kim, thank you first for your advocacy. You're doing stellar work. And ironically, I'm writing a PDR to the Court of Criminal Appeals as we speak. This is really kind of appreciate. But my question to you is this. First, have you ever seen an appeal like this? Because my understanding is the Court of Criminal Appeals sent it down saying y'all used the wrong construction of the statute. And the opinion that came out of the Second Court of Appeals was determining the sufficiency of the evidence. So as far as I see this is purely political. And to that end, is there any mechanism that y'all have to dismiss a frivolous appeal like you would like a Rule 91A dismissal on the civil side or any dismissal like that? Because I think it's frankly unethical to appeal it following the Court of Criminal Appeals opinion in this case, but I haven't seen the mechanism whereby you could get it thrown out, just on its face, because I don't know how to get there at all.
From my understanding, there isn't one. We will have an opportunity to file a response to their request for discretionary review. So we're still, obviously, I'm not her only attorney, and we're still evaluating whether or not we will respond, because to be quite honest, it's trash. I don't know if you read it. It's trash. And, we're debating whether or not we actually even, want to even give it the credence to draft a response. But I believe ultimately we will, because we should say something, because this does not deserve the court's review. And hopefully the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals will not take it up. But no, I don't believe there's any mechanism like on the civil side where we can just get this out of here, please. This doesn't even require one moment of your time.
I mean, I think this is sanctionable, arguably sanctionable conduct, because it's so rare that you have the top court. And Roland, for all the viewers, the Court of Criminal Appeals in Texas is like our criminal Supreme Court. So this is basically the criminal Supreme Court saying, y'all got it wrong below, look at it again, them acquitting, following that instruction, and then this Tarrant County DA still trying to press the issue because he doesn't want to lose in the court of public opinion. But the court has already said what it is. So, I mean, to me, it's sanctionable because I don't think there's an ethical basis on which to advance this appeal. Anyway, my thoughts.
Well, I certainly hope the court actually does smack them down because this continuation of this case, it's 8 years. She voted in 2016. I'm sorry, you don't spend 8 years on a case like this. Michael?
All right, Attorney Cole, thanks for coming back on, giving us an update. First and foremost, how is Crystal doing with this new news? Number one. Number two, is there anything possibly the Department of Justice can do, the Civil Rights Division, anything like that in regards to suing Texas, what have you?
So first of all, Crystal is understandably distraught. She thought finally that this nightmare was over because it is clear that she has been targeted. They haven't put this much. I always talk about the affluenza team, you know, the case that made national attention. This young man committed several crimes, you know, stole a vehicle, stole alcohol, killed 4 people. And they did not advocate him going to prison. Crystal filled out a form. That's it. She filled out a form with accurate information. She didn't lie on the form. And they want to send her to prison. This is absolutely ridiculous. I would agree that the continued prosecution should be sanctionable because there is no basis for it. Absolutely no basis for it. So Crystal is not well. She's very upset. She really took particular issue with the DA's attempt to disparage her in their last statement. Their language was vile and very unprofessional. So she really took issue with that. To, you know, paint her as a 4-time felon. No, this conviction was thrown out. So you can say, so she isn't a 4-time felon, but they just really took, you know, called her fraudster. They really took some low blows. And so she's not happy. And she was looking forward to moving forward with her future without this hanging over her head. She has had to worry for the last 7 years. At any moment, this case could have turned the opposite direction and she would have been looking at 5 years in jail and prison. And so she finally thought that was over. Your second question, and I apologize, I forgot what your second
Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division.
Yeah.
Is there any role that they can play in this?
I think there's a role that they should play. There are some issues going on in Tarrant County that definitely would, in fact, there's some other issues going on in Tarrant County, may not be known to you, but those of us locally know. I actually am drafting a DOJ complaint, not in regards to Crystal's case, but in some other infringements of rights there in Tarrant County. So the DOJ should definitely step in and actually make a move in Crystal's case too. Typically they don't get involved in pending cases, but they definitely should look at Tarrant County's prosecution, period. Not just in Crystal's case, but in their criminal prosecution, period. Because I guarantee you, Crystal's case is the tip of the iceberg as far as this malicious prosecution goes.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
Can I say one thing?
It is just, again, it is shameful to me. It is utterly ridiculous. And again, they are terrorizing this woman. That's what they're doing. Their behavior is an abomination. And I really believe that civil rights groups and others should be showing up at the Tarrant County Commissioners meeting, condemning the DA, demanding the commissioners do an audit of their department, to waste resources, to waste taxpayer resources going after this one woman for 8 years is nuts. And I really do hope that folks in Tarrant County and Fort Worth are loudly protesting this district attorney, calling him out and demanding he answer to this, because this just makes no sense whatsoever.
I agree, Roland. I agree. And we have been, so many organizations and individuals have reached out in support of Crystal, and we are planning, they are planning some type of actual action and protest of them continuing to pursue Crystal, not just in the interest of justice, but also in the interest of fiscal responsibility. They're spending taxpayer dollars on a political narrative. And that's not how the taxpayers want their dollars spent. I would think if there are funds allocated toward fighting crime, they would really prefer that they pursue people who have actually committed crimes.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.